thank you very much of the Global University for your help, for all the support. So we have the session recording, and that will be in the website. So thank you very much for the technical support. And well, we also want to say thanks to all the people that are connecting right now. We know that in Latin America it's too late, so thank you very much for being here. It's important for us that you listen some of the networks from Asia, and here we have the Professor Lau Chi and the Professor Ashish Kothari. It's a pleasure that you accept to join us, and we are trying to build this platform, this global platform for the transformative economics. And this is just one more step in the building of this process. So, well, here we have Pierre George also, and he will help me to moderate this session.
Hello, everyone. This is Pierre George. I am a volunteer for Caritas International, and I am trying to help develop and implement the idea of social forum processes in a variety and diversity. So this is this is the second attempt to start this process, because there was a first attempt that was hit frontally by the pandemics. It was done in Barcelona in 1920. It was supposed to be 2020, and it was really hit frontally by the pandemic. And then the people did not continue. And the idea has been taken by people in Mexico and Colombia, and they are starting this process anew, afresh. And the idea in this session, in this activity, is try to connect people from Asia continent, in the broad sense, to this process, which at the moment is completely Latin American. There are some, but there is no really participation from other continents. So that's the objective of this idea here, to present this process, answer questions, so people can say, yeah, we're interested to come and build it also.
And well, give the word to Ashish Kothari. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for this opportunity. I know it's a very difficult circumstance. World Social Forum usually has this kind of confusion, so it's okay. It's part of the activist atmosphere. That's okay. So thanks for this opportunity. My name is Ashish Kothari. I work with an Indian environmental group called Kalpavriksh, which is 45 years old, but also with a national platform called Vikalp Sangam, or the Alternatives Confluence, and also the Global Tapestry of Alternatives, which I'll explain a bit later. So I think we're all familiar with the kind of challenge that we have with regard to neoliberal capitalist economies, the processes of centralization, the processes of profit making, of commodification, of commercialization, and what that has, and of course combined also with more and more authoritarian governments. So what that has brought to the earth in terms of ecological collapse, what it has brought to human beings in terms of continued deprivation of billions of people from the basic needs that they have, and also inequalities. We're seeing sort of greater and greater inequalities in the world. I'm from India, and we're actually seeing probably the history's greatest inequality right now, financial and economic inequality. We also see that from within the same dominant system, there are so-called solutions that are coming, which are supposed to get us out of the ecological and economic kind of crises that we're in, such as including the sustainable, not just carbon trading and things like that, but even something like sustainable development, which to my mind is actually flawed, Because if you look at the SDG framework, the Sustainable Development Goals framework, it talks about equality and gender justice and sustainability and all of that. But on the other hand, one of its goals is also economic growth. And we know, at least those of us who work on alternative economies, we know that economic growth is itself unsustainable. It's inherently unsustainable. You cannot keep having more and more and more material consumption, energy throughputs, and so on a finite planet. So we need to look beyond these very superficial solutions, sometimes very dangerous solutions that are coming to us, and look at really fundamental transformations, fundamental shifts in economic and political and social paradigms, without which I don't think that we're going to be able to solve the sorts of crises that we're in. So what are those fundamental transformations? This is really, I think, what we ought to be discussing today. And I think basically one of the things like what many of us are working on is to say, how do we bring the economy back as part of society and within ecological limits, so that the economy is not just about finances and money and those who have capital, but it is about fundamentally caring and sharing. It's about livelihoods. It's about occupations that are linked to nature, linked to culture, linked to society. It is about work that is enjoyable, not soul deadening, which is the problem with, for billions of people. Even if they have employment, many of them don't have employment, but if they have employment, they are in very non-creative, mechanical kind of jobs, the sort of mass industrial jobs that people have, or what the late anthropologist David Graeber called bullshit jobs, or what I call deadlihoods. Instead of livelihoods, it's mostly deadlihoods. So instead of that, the paradigm shifts that we want, I want to give a few examples of what's happening in our part of the world and some others. So, for instance, many of the communities are reclaiming economic self-reliance, saying that instead of depending on economic globalization, depending on corporations and governments far away from us for our fundamental economic needs, we rebuild our own local economy, which is based on local collective resources, which could be land, forest, water, etc., our own skills like crafts and small-scale manufacturing, agriculture, and whatever is available there. As an example of that, to my mind, which is really inspiring for me, in India, is from South India, where 5,000 women farmers belonging to the so-called untouchable Dalits in India, who have been severely socially marginalized for centuries. Over the last 40 years, they have rebuilt their agriculture system using their own traditional seeds, going completely organic, sharing all the knowledge, sharing all the seeds, rebuilding back into the commons rather than privatization. And through that, creating not just food security for these 5,000 families with totally organic and only rainfall, but also what they call food sovereignty. And that's a really fundamental move towards transformative economies, claiming complete control over everything to do with food, right? There are similar, of course, food sovereignty movements all over the world. Another example, which I think is very interesting or important from the Indian context, South Asian context, is commoning. In the case of the Dalit women farmers, it was seeds, but we also have movements where people are actually commoning even their private lands. In central India, for instance, one village 20 years back declared that all the private land of the village would become part of the village commons. So there is no private land there, because they said privatization is also a fundamental problem. So we need to be moving towards at least all the resources that we are dependent on, the nature, the land, etc., have to be part of the commons. We then have also movements of intellectual commons or knowledge commons, open source technologies, copy left instead of copyright. In India, again, the move to have, bring back traditional systems of medicine, which were open. They were not privatized, instead of what is happening with allopathy now. And actually what's happening with traditional systems also, where some corporations are capturing that traditional knowledge and privatizing it. So as against that, movements for bringing that back into medicinal knowledge, for instance, back into the commons. Also part of this is bringing back the dignity of labor. It's very important, because in our society, one of the big reasons for inequality is that those who do intellectual work are considered to be higher status than those who do physical work. And so somebody who writes a critical an article on food, for instance, gets paid more than somebody who's producing the food. That's the sort of inversion that has happened with our economy. So the movements of trying to create dignity for labor. So we have, for instance, in Western India, an organization called SEVA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, which is now in many parts of the country, where women who are laboring, whether it's on the streets as street vendors or as domestic workers or as agricultural workers, their status, their dignity, their rights to work and their rights to healthy work and healthy living environment, etc. So there are tens of thousands of women that are involved in that. And I think if we are able to sort of put all of this together, we then also argue for moving beyond growth, GDP as a measure of development. In fact, I don't even call it development. I would say well-being, because the word development itself is inherently flawed in many ways. But well-being, moving towards well-being through indicators that are not gross domestic product, not per capita income, not percentage economic growth, but really, does everybody have good food to eat, nutritious food? Does everybody have clean water? Does everybody have good learning opportunities? Does everybody have a voice in decision making? Those are the indicators, many of them qualitative, that we need to move, that countries and peoples need to move towards, to see, are people really happy? Are they satisfied? Are we doing well? Not just is economic growth rising. So what we try and do here in South Asia through a process called the Vikalp Sangam, which means the confluence of alternatives, where people who are working on not just transformative economies, but also radical democracy, claiming decision-making on the ground, saying democracy is not about elections. It's about us claiming power where we are and exercising that power collectively in a responsible manner. So people who are doing radical democracy, people who are claiming back their rights to the commons, people who are fighting for social justice, gender justice, for instance, or justice for sexual minorities, or justice for people who are disabled, part of the economy, but also part of social decision-making, political decision-making. So how do we fight for more equality and less discrimination? Then we have struggles for asserting our cultural identity. In South Asia, we have 800, 900 living languages. We have every 100 kilometers of food system changes. So if you look at cultural diversity and knowledge diversity, in South Asia, we have at least 8 different medicinal systems. Allopathy is only one of them. We have 7 other traditional medicinal systems. So multiple knowledge systems, all of that, the diversity of that, and that also in the commons and not privatized, are also part of the struggles. And then, of course, saving the environment, because without ecological sustainability, we're all dead anyway. So the struggles for even rights of nature, the struggles for protecting nature as much as we protect ourselves and our human rights. So if we put all of these together, we call it a flower of transformation. The 5 petals, the political transformations, the economic transformations, the social transformations, the cultural and knowledge transformations, and the ecological transformation. You put all of these together as a flower with intersecting petals, because these are all intersecting issues. And at the core of that flower of transformation is values, ethics, solidarity, part of transformative economy or solidarity economy, generosity, compassion, working with each other, economics of caring and sharing, diversity, a diversity of faiths. One of the biggest problems we face again in South Asia is the imposition of single religions on other religions. This is a big problem in India right now. So how do we also assert multiple faith, the right to have your own faiths or your own non-religious ethical systems? Yeah, so that flower of transformation, what we're also calling radical ecological democracy. Radical democracy meaning we're all part of decision making, and of course with an ecological responsibility towards not just human beings, but also other species. So part of transformative economies also has to be the economy of the earth. How do we ensure that other species are also part of decision making, that we're aware of the fact that the earth is to be shared with millions of other species, not just human beings. So let me end by just talking about a process that we're The national process in India where we're trying to bring a lot of these together is what I said, Vikalp Sangam, or Alternatives Confluence. But connecting this to also similar networks in fact, you mentioned Mexico and Colombia. So we have Crianza Mutua in Mexico, Crianzas Mutuas in Colombia, MASA, that is the Movement for Solidarity and Alternatives in Southeast Asia. We have South African networks like the Climate Justice Charter movement and the Food Sovereignty Alliance of South Africa, the Food Sovereignty Alliance of Africa itself as a continental thing, Women Against Extractivism in Africa, many such movements, the Commons movement in Europe, many of these movements trying to bring together at a global level through what we call the global tapestry of alternatives. It's a tapestry where weaving it horizontally. It's not a single organization which becomes hierarchical and somebody somewhere is taking all the decisions, but where all are equal and where we sort of link up through our common interests. We also assert that each one of us is unique. There's a pluriverse. There's a book that we brought out some time back of 100 examples of these alternatives all over the world, which is available in many languages, including Spanish. So a pluriverse of alternatives coming together in an equal manner, horizontally weaving. That's why we call it tapestry. Weaving, or I think tejido is the Spanish word. We weaving it together. So we hope to very much link up with what you all are doing and have you also coming into the programs that the Global Tapestry is doing. Thank you again for this opportunity, and adios.
Thank you, Ashish. Well, right now we are going to give the voice to Kinchi, the Professor Lau Kinchi, so she can tell us something about the work of the Global University for Sustainability and all the things they are doing in China.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here in this panel on the question of transformative economies. So you were saying that this network has started in Latin America, and we are wanting to promote this in Asia. Actually, over 10 years ago, we had a Chinese delegation to go to Mexico, and with the help of Luis Lopez Sierra, who was our very dear friend, we were taken to see the different experiments and different practices which were going on in Mexico. And later, we were also recommended to go to see the experiences in Chile, in Argentina, in other places. And that was also how I came to meet with Claudia, who was a very young lady at that time and very shy. Yes. So it with what they have done for a long time in Mexico. So we had learned about how they were working through the community currencies to help have all the resources being retained in the community. For example, you will buy the orange juice produced by your neighbor instead of buying a Coca-Cola, things like that. So after that, after our trip to Mexico, then a colleague tried to attempt to do this in Hong Kong and got quite famous about this. And Professor Wen Tejin, who was also there for the visit, also came back and then tried to promote this. And we also talked about this in China when we were helping with the rural communities and with trying to build the rural communities. Well, in China, we had a first wave of rural reconstruction in the 1920s and 1930s when there was a devastating impact of modernization and urbanization on the countryside. So that was the time when James Yan, Liang Shuming, and Tao Xinzhi, and a whole group of pioneers went to the villages. So some of them got their PhDs in the US, wherever, but then they stayed in the village to help promote the rural reconstruction. And then since the 1980s, Professor Wen has been the one of the most important promoters of the second wave of rural reconstruction in China. And the reason for this, of course, is that after the opening and reform of the after the open and reform policies, so the market became more and more the driving force, and so that made it very difficult for the peasants who now seem to have the opportunity to have freedom in the market, then to be very much adversely affected. So then there was also the drainage of manpower, of resources, of capital from the villages to the cities. That is also why there was the need for the rural reconstruction movement. And so the whole idea was to see how the villages are being impacted, how peasants are being impacted, and how agriculture was also being taken up more and more by big corporations and even some multinationals. So from what was happening in China since 1980, so we had been promoting this rural reconstruction movement. We set up the James Yan Rural Reconstruction Institute in Dingxian, which was 2 hours away from Beijing, and that served as a kind of training center for different peasant communities. And then after that, then we also moved to Beijing near the capital, where we set up the Little Donkey Farm. And Xiaohui here, he's the leader of that Little Donkey Farm, where we continued with training peasants. So the main training and the main kind of educational efforts we were trying to do were to try to see how to rebuild the kind of social relations under the impact of this so-called modernization. So we encouraged cooperatives to be built, small kind of credit union kind of things for the microcredit. And also, we were also promoting more organic agriculture using not pesticide or chemical fertilizers, but how to do the composting, how to be preserving seeds, etc. So all the things that need to be done in the village to try to help rebuild the community. Of course, that is very difficult. The difficulty and the challenge is that with this whole onslaught of so-called modernization as progressive, and China being bullied and invaded by the imperial powers since 1900. So there has been all this kind of humiliation and also plunder of resources from China that the mainstream discourse, even within the Communist Party, was to modernize. And to modernize, it means development. And the model is, of course, Britain and the US. So then there was the slogan, catching up with the US and the UK. And so the whole model of modernization and development is the Western model, the Eurocentric model. And of course, we see that China has been so-called quite successful, especially with the mobilizations in the liberation war, which would be called terrorism today. The armed struggle of the revolutionary forces in the last century would be labeled terrorism, although there's no label of state terrorism like the U.S. What U.S. is doing and Israel is doing. So because at that time also the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, was so corrupt and so bankrupt that it was disintegrating, and which was also a good opportunity for the Communist Party to be rallying all the intellectuals and farmers and workers. And so after the building of China, New China, so there was China followed this path of modernization. So there was a lot of resources put into industrialization, especially through the help of the Soviet Union. Because of the Korean War, the Soviet Union was helping to build an industrial base in northeast China. But then, even with the what was happening in the 60s and 70s, so basically China managed to have its industrialization, which was the basic support for with the heavy industries. It was the basic support for it to go into the light industries with manufacturing after 1980. So you see all these Chinese goods, the plastics, the electronics, everything, everywhere in the world. But of course, we have been very critical about this policy of these cheap exports of the industrial products, because it is on the basis of the exploitation of the past labor, that is all the facilities, the current labor, the women, the young women labor, and our future resources, that is the damage on environment, because with all the contamination and pollution. So with all these, then we have the rural reconstruction movement in China, working trying to work on rebuilding village communities. And women would be the center force for some time, because they would be the ones to stay in the village. But then with all these factories in southern China opening up, so the women became the main force to leave the villages. So we were left with the old people and the young people. So, well, we can go later on into this. So when we talk about the transformative economies, I think it is most important to see what would be the basis, the conditions for this. So, of course, I think we all share the idea that we need the local economies to be built, and they need to be as self-sufficient as possible, so that you don't buy the seeds from Monsanto. You don't need to have all these chemical fertilizers imported from outside. So that but then in China, I think the advantage that is the legacy of the revolution is that the peasants still have their own land, which is still a major problem for many of the global South countries. So the peasants still have their own land. The village collective owns the land and do the redistribution, and that is still so today. Although there has been, more people are not willing to farm, and so they ask their relatives to farm for them. So I think the basis for the conditions for these local self-sufficient economies, first of all, is the land, then the seeds, the local seeds, the traditional seeds, that could also be adapting to the climate change, to the droughts, to the floods, etc. And we also need I think the question of energy is becoming more serious. And I've also written a book on the catastrophe of Fukushima. And so I think China now is building a lot of nuclear power plants in order to provide for the need for the energy, which is also, I think, very problematic. And I think we have been very fortunate that we have not had any major accident until now. And so I think then I think the most difficult part maybe is to counter this paradigm of modernization, as if this is progress. And so so we have been teaching all our students The Small is Beautiful, the Schumacher book, Small is Beautiful. And I think this is, and so we cannot just blame the government or the multinationals for their domination, because it is so embedded in the general common sense that people would look for a lifestyle which is so-called modern. The rich people in the village would want to import the tiles from Saudi Arabia, because that is supposed to be the most expensive and the most elegant ones, things like that. So I think in terms of the cultural mentality, the mindset, we need to do this. But then we always say that the opportunities come out of crisis. So now I think we are having the general crisis, not only globally, but also within China. We are having very serious unemployment with, for example, university graduates, there's 20% unemployment. And so I think everywhere there are problems. I will not go into the problems. We have a women's panel today at 2:00 at the Manaslu tent. So we will give more examples of the work being done by women communities for ecology and for ecological and social justice. But then I think what we need to really challenge is how to be rebuilding these relationships, because it has been egoism and individualism with the market economy and competition. And I think for transformative economies, I think the basis is the people, that the people themselves would be the ones who would want a different kind of economy, different kind of lifestyle, which is more simple, not luxurious, but then satisfying, with the family being together, not being divided into different parts. And I think that would be, I think we would all also need to work together for this. And I agree with almost everything that Ashish was saying. The commoning, it is also so important nowadays. So thank you very much.
Well, all these ideas and more are building also in the Global University for Sustainability. That is a global network of thinkers and activists that we are trying to reflect about these strategies, the local strategies, but also what we do with the global problem. So it's a very friendly network, and also it's an important to create these new ideas. I listen to you, I feel like my home, really, because we have a lot of similarities of what we are doing in Mexico and in Latin America. We also have a legacy, a lot of knowledge of the indigenous people. For example, concepts. I want to only to mention 3 concepts. The good living of the South America. I think it's one of the concepts that are guide us through our experience. The second is autonomy, of course, of the Zapatistas movement. I think that the third for me important is communality. From another place of Mexico, Oaxaca, there is also a place who live a lot of native nation, and the communality, it's a concept that, as I think Kinchi said yesterday, that one of the things that we learn of the indigenous people is not to think in myself, if not in us, in an us, also create an us. So when we wake up, how can we create communality? When we eat, how can we create communality? In every part of our life, don't feel just in my, don't think only in myself, if not in a community, that we are part of a community. And I think this is important to change the way we relate each other and change the way we think the power, because we need to build another kind of power, not the political power of the parties, not the political power of institution, if not the political power of community, of being all together. So, well, that's things that I think we share with Lau Kinchi and with Ashish Kothari. Now, I would like to listen also to you. So, if there is some participation, maybe comments, questions, and of course, if you want also to introduce yourself, to present.
Good morning. I'm Mike Hales. I'm a member of Meet.coop, which is a cooperative that provides digital infrastructure. So it's global. Yeah, it's that's the great thing about digital stuff. I'm coming here to this gathering with 2 commitments, I guess. They're economic, they're political, they're cultural, they're social commitments. One is commons and commoning. The other is bioregion. Yeah. And I think these two together are enormously powerful. I mean, Ashish has said a lot about commons and commoning. So let me maybe just add another layer on that. Commons makes most sense to most people as land and material stuff. But it's clear that the
Can you speak louder?
yeah. Which one? This one. Okay, that's better. Everything can be commoned. Yeah, everything can be commoned, and the commoning itself is a very powerful politics. It's direct, democratic. It's pluralistic. It crosses the generations. It's about sustainability. It's about the future. We can and we must common nature. In many centuries ago, people did common nature, and you didn't have to think about it because you could take it for granted that nature would sustain. And so the stewardship that people exercise was more honoring the capacities of nature. I think today we've put ourselves in this stupid situation where we actually have to be active to get nature back to sustaining the conditions in which we can live. So we have to create active commons for nature now, which is a very complicated kind of thing to do, to restore what originally were straightforward commons. But commoning nature is one thing. Commoning of culture is very important. So that the ways in which we understand, the ways in which we communicate, the ways in which we assemble our understandings, the way in which we form formations, the way in which we network our formations. These can be, and I think should be, commons. There's a more difficult kind of commons, which is the commons of the hearts, the commons of the feelings, the commons of emotions, of structures of feeling, which is absolutely fundamental. It's more difficult because we take it for granted that as human beings we can do this. But it's very clear that as human beings we can do exactly the opposite as well. People can be completely stupid, completely ignorant, completely selfish. So I think to create active commons of the heart is also part of the mission that we have to pick up these days. Yeah. But basically, commoning is an insurgent politics. It's a very powerful politics. Bioregion, I think, is also powerful. It's utterly real. The bioregion is an utterly real thing. It's not an abstract construct. It's not some kind of academic theoretical construct. But it provides us with a level which connects the local and the global. The world can be seen. We don't know how to see it yet, but the world can be seen as a multiplicity of bioregions, and each of those bioregions has its own integrity, its own natural constitution. But a bioregion is also a cultural region. A bioregion is a geographical space in which people can organize. It is a locality within which there are other localities. So I hope that some of us are going to gather at the session which GTA is organizing later on about bioregion, because I'm new to World Social Forum, but as I feel around, I have a feeling that bioregion isn't really well understood or well engaged with in WSF. So this is something for the future, I suggest.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Well, we are trying to construct a diversity, a space inclusive from many concepts and many experience. And of course, by region has to be also an important concept, important practice. Well, we are going to finish in a few minutes. So maybe if two person want to participate also. Well, Pierre, of course.
I will give a more formal view on, because here we are about building. So the intervention for the moment have been on substance. what is transformative economy? So we had Ashish, we had Kinchi, other people have Claudia. So they are expressing what they put behind the word transformative economy. Now, I just wanted to have a little formal input about what is a social forum, because we are here, this is building a world social forum on transformative economy. So the previous intervention has been about transformative economies, and I would like to make a little mention of what is social forum. So, of course, here we are in the WSF 2024 event. So this is lasting 3 days, with many activities that you can see in those tents. And it's a kind of physical implementation of the notion of open space, where different groups make different dialogues on, they self-organize dialogues. And they say, we are going to make a dialogue on this, please come. And they organize the dialogue, which is Claudia and myself have been doing. So, the idea of a social forum process is more or less the same idea, but in a more permanent way. So it's not limited to an event. So when we say build the WSF of transformative economy, it has two meanings. There is an event that is planned in Colombia, but many people won't have the money or the time or the visa or I don't know what to go to Colombia. But the idea of a process is that it's a permanent intercommunication process between the organization that say, we are part of this. And so the challenge is for the people that want to build this, make it happen, it's to find a format through which people can feel they are part of this process, and they understand as participants what they can do. Here, for instance, where people realized when the forum started in Nepal, people were not clear that they could announce activities, that they had the power inside the space to do this that was proposed to them. And now there are 400 activities. And people understand that they have to organize the activities. Nobody's going to tell them what to do and how to do. So the ways of building the process and participating in the process are very important to make it clear to people. What is this that we propose you to come in? So I'm not going to be long. I just want to say this is a very important part, because then people understand what is this animal of social forum of transformative economy and how can my organization participate in it. So when this is the invitation narrative. So how do we invite people and to what and to do what? And this is independent on the substance, where there is a great diversity and richness. And this will be taken care by the organizations participating through a diversity of activities, or even other things than activity. So I just wanted to say that building the process is also finding a common understanding about what are the ways to participate in it. Because then the substance, everyone may have diversity and agree depending the like-mindedness and affinities. This will be the diversity inside the space. But the space itself, how does it work? This is very important, because then people understand how they can participate and they are empowered. So I just wanted to make this little, if you have any question on this, because the title of the activity is Building the WSFTE. So how do we build it? So that's independently of the substance that will be discussed in it. So I just wanted to make this point.
Well, I think we are going to finish the session. It's a little difficult to have this connection with Latin America, but we are trying to do it.